I went to 2 software hackathons and 1 drone competition. And you could say I know a thing or two about hackathons. And in this video, I'm going to be transferring my knowledge straight into your head. For starters, I'm going to start with software related hackathons. First of all, to get into a software related hackathon, you first need to understand version control. Why? Because sharing your code files on WhatsApp may sound like a fun idea at first, and then you realize how is everybody going to update the code base and how are those updates going to be merged into your current code. Hurts your brain, right? So that is exactly why you need to learn GitHub version control, because GitHub handles all of that for you, merging different files, merging different code bases, all of those things. GitHub can do that for you. So first of all, what I want you to do is learn version control and look up a good Git bash tutorial and learn it start to finish and implement it for your team. This is the first thing you need to do if you're going to a software hackathon. And the second thing you've got to do is this: decide on a stack. If you're going to be making an app or a website, I suggest Flutter, because Flutter is the easiest framework for literally anything. No need to edit XML files, no need to add JavaScript, CSS, all of that BS. All you've got to do is sit down and code the UI. And you can just connect it with any backend using Kotlin. And it's not even that hard. And when you're doing this, what I suggest that you do is take a look at a database service that's really easy to use. There's one called Firebase and another called Supabase. Firebase may sound really easy and fun to work with, except it's really time consuming to set up. So that's why I prefer Supabase, not only because it's open source, not only because it has Postgres SQL, which you can later decide to host on your own device if you want to save up on some cash. It is really easy to set up. It just involves setting up this one thing called an anon key and a site URL or something like that, and then you're fully set with your database. So that is a stack covered. You can use multiple services for maps and other things. You just have to check out the pubdev directory and you'll find a lot of pre-built backends there. Yep. The next thing you want to do in a software hackathon is this: present well. A lot of people sideline this and it comes back later biting you out really badly, because if you have a really good result but you're unable to showcase the result to the jury in a good way, it's gonna bite you back. So the basic idea is this: you gotta have one good presenter on the team who is also capable of doing PPTs really well, and he's documenting your work in random intervals, which are preferably very often. So now that that's taken care of, these 3 things are core to any software hackathon. Now the next is the theory of splitting work, the theory of work splitting, something like that. The idea is this: you don't want 2 people to be working on one thing that collides into the other thing. For example, I'm building the backend of the database that will collide into the front end. That is kind of a scary situation to be in, except you can prevent this collision by setting up getter methods for the different variables. I'm throwing technical jargon at you. How do I say this? You basically make a placeholder for the variables, and then other people use the placeholders, and the backend guys, they just feed the variables from the server into this thing and get and send it back to the server the same way. So that is what I meant. If you make all of the work parallel to each other without collisions, you'll find that work goes a lot smoother. And number 4, Git push and Git pull, they work best when you don't change individual code files when somebody else is working on them. For example, participant A is working on the database connections and setting up auth, and participant B is also working on auth, but a later stage of auth, like the UI of auth. That would be kind of problematic. You want to know why? Well, because number 1, if you do that, the parity between the thinking of the guy who's doing the back end of the auth and the guy who's designing the front end is going to exist, and you're going to get a collision. So think about that. And that was it for software hackathons. All you've got to do is have a solid base and split work properly. One good presenter who can do PPTs as well, one guy who's good with backend services and good with logics in general, and then another guy who's really good at front end. All you need are actually four teammates, that's all. And one other guy who goes around fixing conflicts and stuff. And you can put in multiple people in multiple places, and you can assign them to do different pages at a time if it's an app. And you get what I mean, right? Like if you're using a stack, you're going to be designing multiple things at the same time. So make them modular and make them not colliding into each other while you're assigning work. And that's what I had to say for Software Hackathon. Subscribe, hit the bell icon, and hit the like button and the comment section, because this video helped you. I'm gonna be honest, because this is 2 hackathons and 1 drone competition worth of shit. So it might have helped you, definitely. So share this with a friend or do all of this to support this channel so you'll get more shit like this. Hardware is a little bit different, but all of the basic ideas of software apply here. And I'm going to tell you at the end what X factor you need to win either competition. But before that, we're going to go to hardware. So for the hardware, there's usually 4 things you need to think about: the core components, connectors and modulators, and spares. A lot of people forget this, and it ends up freaking them up because they can't leave the venue of the hackathon until they've finished their hackathon. So that's that. And for the frame, you can either choose to 3D print it, and I'm going to tell you 3 common choices to 3D print stuff with. And you're going to need to know CAD to do stuff, or you can just look at the internet for free models out there and, borrow them and use them in your hackathon. Nobody will know. So that's that. And once you choose the material, which is either ABS plastic is really firm and good. PLA is testing grade shit. You could use this for a hackathon, but imagine your drone breaks down in front of the jury. That would be very sad. And then there's TPU. TPU is the strongest of the 3, and it's also kind of flexible because your phone's silicon cases, that's also TPU. So however you bend it, I've never seen a phone case snap. Maybe jerry rig everything, but yeah, you get the idea, right? So now these are for hardware. For the core components, you need to pick on your microcontrollers, which could be Raspberry Pi or an Arduino or a Jetson Nano, and you need to figure out a way to interface with them. For example, you put the PiCam inside a slot of the Raspberry Pi, and voila, you have a PiCam setup, and you can access it via OpenCV in Python code. And yep, that's that. And then the next is connectors and modulators. Connectors, you're gonna need to solder some shit. You're gonna need to connect some shit to some other shit. For example, in a drone, there's a conduction board, and you're gonna have to connect it with something else. And you're gonna have to look at that when you're purchasing parts. Connectors and modulators. Modulators is some parts require voltage in a different quantity. For example, for a drone battery to the conduction board, it needs to be 11.1 volts. But from the drone battery to the Raspberry Pi, it has to be 5 volts and 5 amperes. You'll have your brain freaked out if you don't figure this stuff before, and I can tell you because I've been in that exact same spot. And if you get a buck converter before, you will thank yourself a million times again and again. And yep, the next is spares. When you go to enough competitions, you'll figure out that some components have a higher failing rate, so you're gonna have to buy them more often. And that's the basics of hardware. And for the stack, it's something similar. If you want to build a hardware X software project, you could use an AWS server and set it to all TCP for the purposes of testing, which means it allows commands from all different servers that you want it to. Like I can send a command from my laptop to the AWS thing, and it will relay it to your hardware thing. Or you could just use Bluetooth and connect it via an app. That's much simpler as well. So you can do all of these things. You can connect an app via Bluetooth and use that as your hardware stack, or you can put in AWS if you're doing something a little bit more advanced and it requires fast API with a web server. So those are 2 things you can do in the stack part. And we usually use drone kit to control the drone and mission planner to set the path of the drone. And yep, that's the basics of all of it. And now I'm gonna come to work splitting for hardware. So I did mention frame, core components, connectors, modulators, and spares, right? You can have one person on your team get the 3D print done before the competition for your stuff. That's first. And the core components and the connectors and modulators, you can send someone out to buy all of the parts That's one. And then you could make other people connect the parts that are bought with solders and all of those things. And you need people with really steady hands if they are to solder some shit. And yeah, that's that. And you need somebody who's capable of calibrating the tech that you're using in that. For example, if you're using a PICSOC and a GPS and some telemetry, you're gonna have to have a way to have them interface with each other, right? There's a way to calibrate them, and you just YouTube it. It's not that hard, and you have one person that YouTubes it inside the hackathon. So that's that. And then next is spares. I will never forget this. We lost a drone competition because we did not have a bug converter. So we did not really lose it, but we only could get through one round because for the second one we needed to do autonomous testing. And yep, that's quite literally it. If you want an idea on stuff you want to use for hardware, there's MicroPython for Raspberry Pi to set controls on the I/O pins, and there is C if you want to use Arduino. And yep, it's about parallel work in hardware. The thing is, you have to realize that in hardware, there are different systems you're going to build that you're going to put together at the end. So one person works on one system and the other guy works on the other one, and you connect them out in the end. And that is how it works. You have to become a human GitHub of sorts in the end to merge all of the conflicts and make your final system. And that is a way to create work that is parallel and not coinciding with other work. So that is what I had to say here. Done. I think I yapped too much, but if I had to tell you 3 things that you could take away today realistically, it would be these 3. First, assign work parallelly, not vertically, because people get confused really fast if their work starts colliding into another person's thing. And 2, use version control with Git, because it's extremely important and it saves you a lot of time and it keeps everybody on the same page when they're working on different things. For example, they work on a backend update and it updates the front end. And the front end team is still working on the front end. So work goes on parallelly and it does not touch each other. And in cases where work could touch each other, you could create an interface and you can handle it via the interface such that the different works don't touch each other. So, yep, that's the basics. That's the 2 things that I would tell you to take away if you were to do this. And 3, last of all, is to have really good presentation. Somebody who documents it all and puts it in an interactive presentation is extremely key to winning a hackathon. It may sound cringe, but having a marketing guy genuinely helps you get the better half of the juries. And that's what I had to say, and that's quite literally it for this video. Okay, bye, see you in the next one.